The dark final days of Herod. It was the year 4 BCE. The desert fortress of Jericho stood like a jewel of stone and water, a palace carved from ambition. Its gardens overflowed with exotic plants brought from far-off lands, its pools glimmered under the Judean sun, and its marble halls echoed with Roman elegance. This was no ordinary residence. It was the seat of a king who had ruled with iron will for more than 3 decades. But within those walls, beauty masked corruption. Behind the gilded doors of the palace, the most feared man in Judea was dying. King Herod the Great, client king of Rome and master builder of palaces, fortresses, and even the Temple of Jerusalem, lay in a bed drenched with sweat. His body, once powerful, was now a grotesque ruin. His limbs swelled with fluids until his skin split. Ulcers oozed with blood and pus. His breath stank so foul that attendants covered their faces. Worms crawled from his flesh while he still drew breath. This was no ordinary illness. This was a spectacle, an execution carried out by his own body. And here's the haunting question. Was this simply the cruelty of disease, or the judgment of history itself? Herod, who once struck fear into nations, was now a prisoner inside his own flesh. To understand the terror of Herod's final days, you must first understand the man who wore the crown. Herod was not born into greatness. He was an outsider, the son of an Idumean official and an Arab noblewoman, ruling over a people who never fully accepted him as one of their own. Yet through cunning, ruthlessness, and Rome's favor, he rose to the throne of Judea. The Roman Senate itself proclaimed him King of the Jews. From that moment on, Herod's reign was a balancing act between ambition and paranoia. He was, above all, a builder. Masada, Herodium, Caesarea Maritima, fortresses that still stand today, monuments of stone meant to outlast memory itself. He expanded the Second Temple in Jerusalem, transforming it into one of the wonders of the ancient world. His palaces dazzled with mosaics, colonnades, and pools shimmering in the desert heat. In stone, he sought immortality. But the cost of that immortality was blood. Herod's reign was scarred by suspicion. He executed his beloved wife Mariamne, consumed by jealousy and fear of betrayal. He murdered 3 of his own sons, convinced they plotted against him. He drowned his brother-in-law in a palace pool. Courtiers, generals, priests, all lived in the shadow of his wrath. Augustus Caesar, watching from Rome, quipped bitterly, "It is better to be Herod's pig than his son." And still, his power grew. For decades, he was untouchable, crushing uprisings, silencing dissent, ruling through fear and spectacle. But history has a cruel symmetry. For in the end, it was not a rival sword or a Roman betrayal that destroyed him. It was his own body. By the time Herod's disease took hold, he was an old man, weak in body, but still consumed by suspicion. Pain did not humble him. Agony did not soften him. Instead, his paranoia burned brighter, like a fire raging in a collapsing house. He knew the truth. His people hated him. For decades they had lived under his shadow, forced to bow to his decrees, taxed to fund his monuments, silenced by his cruelty. They whispered of his crimes, the execution of his wife Mariamne, the strangling of his sons, the endless purges. To them, Herod was no savior king. He was a butcher draped in royal purple, and he feared what would happen when he died. Would the people mourn him? No. They would celebrate. They would fill the streets with joy, not grief. And Herod, even in the clutches of decay, could not bear the thought. So he conceived one last, horrific plan. He ordered that the most respected men of Judea, elders, leaders, nobles, be arrested. Hundreds were rounded up and locked inside the hippodrome at Jericho. Herod's command was chilling. The moment he died, they were all to be executed. His logic was simple. If the people would not weep for him, they would weep for the loss of their leaders. His death would not pass without mourning. This was the mind of Herod in the end, rotting, fevered, and yet still grasping for control. Ask yourself, what kind of man, writhing in pain, eaten alive by disease, still plots mass murder with his final breath? Was this simply madness born of sickness, or the true face of a tyrant revealed when all masks had fallen away? What exactly killed Herod the Great? Historians and physicians have debated his illness for centuries, poring over Josephus's descriptions like detectives at a crime scene. The details are shocking. Swollen limbs, unbearable pain in the bowels, worms crawling from his flesh, a stench so foul that attendants could barely approach. Modern medicine offers theories. Some argue he suffered from chronic kidney disease, which would explain the swelling, the fever, and the convulsions. Others suggest congestive heart failure, his body drowning in its own fluids. A darker diagnosis proposes Fournier's gangrene, a rare and horrifying infection that devours the flesh around the genitals, breeding maggots and releasing an odor of decay. The account of worms crawling from his body fits this grim possibility all too well. Still others wonder if poison played a role. Herod had no shortage of enemies, both within his court and beyond it. Could someone, perhaps a rival or even a servant, have hastened his decline? But there is another explanation, one that cannot be found in medical journals. According to the biblical tradition, Herod's death was not natural. It was judgment. This was the man, after all, who, according to the Gospel of Matthew, ordered the massacre of the innocents, the slaughter of Bethlehem's children, carried out to prevent the rise of a newborn king. Could such blood be spilled without consequence? Could such cruelty echo into eternity without a reckoning? In this view, Herod was not merely dying. He was being punished. His body became the stage on which justice was written in flesh and blood. And yet, even here, we are left with uncertainty. Was Herod a victim of a rare disease, of poison, or of divine wrath? Or was his end something more, an event too perfectly suited to his crimes to ever be explained away by science alone? Picture it. The king lies in his chamber in Jericho, once perfumed with incense and music, now suffocating under the stench of rotting flesh. Servants tiptoe like shadows, their faces hidden behind cloths to block the odor. Physicians whisper in corners, not in the language of cures but of despair. Even the marble walls seem to absorb the sound of his groans, echoing them back like accusations. Herod's body had become his prison. His legs swelled grotesquely, his stomach ballooned as if ready to burst. Ulcers split his skin and oozed pus, soaking his bedding. His voice cracked into screams as worms writhed in his flesh. The ruler who had once commanded armies now could not command his own body. In desperation, his attendants tried bizarre remedies. They immersed him in warm oil baths, hoping to draw out the sickness. They prepared strange herbal potions, bitter to the tongue, useless against the disease. They lanced his sores, releasing rivers of blood and pus, but offering no relief. Nothing worked. And Herod knew it. Driven to despair, he attempted to end his own life. He seized a knife and tried to thrust it into himself, but was stopped by his cousin. Even suicide, it seemed, was denied him. His suffering would not end quickly. It would linger. It would humiliate. Meanwhile, the hippodrome of Jericho groaned with the voices of the imprisoned elders, men awaiting death at the tyrant's command. Outside, the people whispered, waiting for the news they longed to hear. The tyrant was dead. Inside, Herod still writhed, clinging to power with the last shreds of will. A man who had once killed to silence others now found that his own body would not silence him. Every scream was a reminder that no fortress, no crown, no army could shield him from the truth. All kings fall, and some fall harder than others. At last, after days of unspeakable torment, Herod's body surrendered. It was the year 4 BCE. In the palace of Jericho, the tyrant who had ruled Judea for more than 3 decades lay still. His cries ceased. His swollen flesh, eaten by worms, no longer moved. The king who had once stood defiant against enemies foreign and domestic was now nothing more than a corpse. But even in death, Herod's shadow loomed. His body was rushed to burial, wrapped in fine cloth and carried under heavy guard. His funeral procession wound its way to Herodium, the fortress palace he had built as his own monument, a man-made mountain in the desert. There, in a lavish tomb carved into stone, the king was laid to rest. Yet the stench of his memory could not be entombed. The people did not mourn. They breathed a sigh of relief. His final order, to slaughter Judea's elders at his death, was mercifully ignored by his sister Salome. The massacre never came. The tyrant died alone, his will undone, his power extinguished. And so the question remains, what killed Herod? Was it the slow, merciless hand of disease? Was it poison, whispered into his food or drink by those who could not kill him openly? Or was it something greater? A reckoning written into his very flesh, a divine judgment upon a man remembered not for his buildings, but for his blood. History offers theories. Medicine provides diagnoses. But the poetry of his end cannot be ignored. A king who spilled blood endlessly died in blood. A ruler who tried to kill the innocent was himself consumed from within. Perhaps, in the end, Herod's body told the truth his monuments tried to silence. No matter how high you build, no stone can protect you from justice. And if Herod's fall was judgment, then how many others, how many rulers, empires, and dynasties may still have their reckoning waiting, hidden in the shadows of history?